Hello, I'm Jack Kaiser with Chippewa Valley Progressive Voices. I'm here today with Nancy Coffey, the UW Extension Nutrition Coordinator for Eau Claire County. We're here to discuss poverty, how it's defined, and its prevalence in Eau Claire County. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning.
What is poverty and how is it defined?
We have a lot of questions about poverty, and the federal government defines it as having minimum resources for families to have an adequate standard of living to meet their basic needs. It does vary by the number of household members and the age of those members.
And what is the intent of setting this? And why would the federal government set these standards?
Well, it was started in the 1960s when at 3 times the cost of a family's basic food needs. The reason it was done that way was at that time, a typical family spent about 1/3 of their budget on food. And we wanted to know if people had enough to be able to get those basic needs that they wanted. That's why it was started in the 60s.
How has the federal government over the last 50 years used these statistical definitions?
Basically, they're used to see if people are eligible for community and federal assistance.
Have they been adjusted from time to time?
They're adjusted annually for inflation.
And what is the poverty line right now for a family for four in the 48 states, save Alaska and Hawaii?
So pre-tax income, it is $24,500 for a family of 4 currently this year.
Okay. Is there another category called near poor or near poverty?
That's a definition that is used often for community assistance. So we know that lots of times people still need help even though they are above the federal poverty line. And so near poor means that they make up to almost twice as much. Usually the guideline is 185% to 200% of poverty, and we classify that as near poor, and they would still then be able to access some community assistance.
And typically on community programs for the near poor, do the benefits diminish on a sliding scale as the increases?
Almost always.
What are the rates of poverty and near poverty in Eau Claire County?
Well, they've changed. From 2008 to 2012, in that span of time, they estimate the amount because it's done every 10 years because of the census. We actually have those long forms where we get all that information about poverty and more detailed from people. But that estimate showed that from 2008 to 2012, 15.7% of our Eau Claire County residents lived below the poverty rate. So this was significantly higher than the state rate. As you know, during that time, we had some economic problems, right? There was problems with people being able to get jobs. There was more foreclosures, that kind of thing that happened during that 2008 era time. Currently, we have about 13%, or 1 out of 8 of our Eau Claire County residents that are considered poor.
And what percentage would be considered near poor?
30%. So 1 out of 3 of our Eau Claire County residents are near poor, meaning that they are have twice as much income as someone considered poor, and yet they struggle to make ends meet.
Typically, who do we find making up the poor and near poor in this area?
In the past, seniors had a real hard time with issues of poverty. And since 1970, we found a decline, partially because of the fact that Social Security policy benefits helped our seniors a great deal. And since then, senior benefits, Social Security benefits, are also increased because of changes in the economy. And so currently, though, we're starting to have more problems with people, elderly, having higher rates of poverty. So right now, it's about 10.5% of our Eau Claire County seniors are living in poverty.
What other demographic groups are disproportionately in poverty in Eau Claire County?
Children have really risen in poverty, and as you might remember, I know I can remember, that when my children were small, we had less income than we do now. At one point, I had 3 children under the age of 5 because I had a daughter, and a year and a half later had twins, and oh boy, I just didn't realize, like, wow, that costs a lot of money. And so most people that have young children have more risk for poverty. And right now we have about 11.2% of our Eau Claire County children living in poverty.
Does poverty hit certain demographic groups based on education, gender, minority status harder than others?
Absolutely. As you can imagine, as we have more education, we tend to be able to attain a better income. And right now, if I only have a high school degree or less, I'm at about a 14% of poverty rate. So it is higher when I have less income. Also, if I'm a single mom, moms tend to make less money than dads do in Eau Claire County and in many counties, and many states in the United States. So as a single mom, if I have a child, I am at, right now, 34% of them are living in poverty.
So 34% of female headed families are in poverty in Eau Claire County?
Right. So if we went by near poor, we would probably double that. So if I'm a single mom and I have a child, my risk is extremely high that I am going to be living in poverty.
What causes poverty?
Poverty is mostly caused because of lack of income. So when I think of our minority population, our biggest minority population is Hmong. Currently, in 2012, about 38% of our Hmong population was living in poverty. That is beginning to change. When I first started working in the Eau Claire County community, that was easily double that. So as people have gotten more in education, as we talked about, they're able to get more income, and limited earnings are the biggest issue of poverty. As my employment increases, and just because I work full-time doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to escape poverty. We have people who work full-time and still are at the poverty rate. My ability to make more money is mostly driven by education.
I'd like to get into some of the details of how various programs are used to fight poverty. Would you be willing to come back for another program on that in the future?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It was a pleasure talking with you.